As I approached the box office, people were lined up to buy tickets for a concert by a group called The Three of Us. I turned to leave when a funny feeling grabbed me deep down in my gut, so I got in line and bought a ticket for the evening performance. I couldn't explain the combination of excitement and apprehension I was feeling. Excited to hear some live music, yet apprehensive about the strange feeling I couldn't shake, as if I were being drawn here for reasons beyond my comprehension. The theater was filling up fast, so I found a seat in the middle of the auditorium, hoping for the best acoustics. The pre-concert excitement was palpable, the noisy buzz of the crowd exhilarating. As I looked around, I couldn't help but notice that this audience was quite young, mostly college-age people of all variety, with only a handful of people over 30. I had to remind myself that I was one of the few audience members old enough to be their parent and in some cases grandparent. At 8 p.m., guests were still filing into their seats, preventing the show from beginning on time. I was getting caught up in the fervor of waiting for these musicians to take the stage, certain I was in for a real treat if the anticipation of the rest of the crowd meant anything. Finally, at 8:30, the house lights dimmed, causing a wave of raucous applause and cheers. The hair stood up on my neck. A young man dressed in jeans and a t-shirt stepped through the curtains with a megaphone in hand, not bothering to try quieting the crowd, for it would have been a futile effort.
You don't need me to tell you why you're here tonight, so put your hands together for the Three of Us.
With that, the audience began hooting, yelling, and stomping their feet, shaking this historic theater to its centuries-old rafters. The oversized burgundy-colored curtains slowly opened as the stage lights were raised to full wattage, revealing an impressive array of musical instruments and electronic gadgetry covering the full breadth of the stage. The center was taken up by the most impressive collection of percussion instruments I had ever seen, gold and silver hardware glittering in the stage lights. Stage left and right were balanced with equally impressive racks of electronic keyboards, guitars, and violin, awaiting the evening's duty on their felt-backed stands. Laser lights flashed in a dizzying array as the first member of the group virtually ran up to stage front from behind the percussion instruments. Realizing that I, too, was by now smiling broadly and emitting a few hollers of my own, I was taken aback by the obvious youth of this performer. He was but a youngster, no more than his early 20s at most. Dressed all in black, he took his bow to acknowledge the audience's applause, his thick, wavy hair falling over his forehead. As he looked out into the crowd, I felt locked into his piercing blue eyes, clearly visible even from this distance. He cocked his index finger and pointed it right at me, as if to say, "This one's for you." Then he turned around and launched himself into his percussion lair, enticing us all to follow him on an introductory trip into the rhythmic complexities of his craft. Bobbing and weaving to the powerful beats he created extemporaneously, he continued, alone, for a full 5 minutes, teasing the audience with but a hint of what was yet to come. Many people, unable to resist the intoxicating rhythms, stood and danced in place. Ever so slowly, he eased up on his emotional outpouring, as if to cue another bandmate to join him on stage. A beautiful young girl, for to me she was far too young to be considered a woman, bounded onto the stage to take her bow. Also dressed all in black, she looked to be about the same age as he, with deep double dimples and a long mane of hair pulled back into a tight ponytail which reached her lower back. Her dark, mystical eyes drew me into her world. She raised both arms above her, waving to the audience almost maniacally, her entire body shaking back and forth with the anticipated excitement of the show yet to begin for her. Like her bandmate before her, she looked out into the audience and pointed directly at me, gracing me with a wide smile and a sense of energy she couldn't hide. Just as abruptly, she turned and retreated to her place at stage left, reaching down to pick up her electric guitar, tossing the strap over her head and shoulder in one smooth motion. And then she let loose like I'd never heard another musician emote, right down to the tips of her toes, making it clear in no uncertain terms that she had been born to do this. She made it look so effortless, closing her eyes to focus her energies on her performance, rocking back and forth ever so gently and slowly, her unbridled smiles causing the same reaction from all who could see her. I sat mesmerized by what I was hearing, unable to stop staring at the two of them as they shared their musical gifts so unselfishly. I knew I was in serious trouble when the third member of the trio took the stage to the thunderous applause of all in attendance. Dressed in the same uniform of all black, she ambled up to stage front as the two other musicians favored her with a fusion rock backbeat. She had long, tight curls, framing the same piercing blue eyes she shared with the percussionist. She looked a bit older than her partners, more comfortable on stage, if that was possible. She followed their pattern of waving to the audience, then looking directly at me as if in personal welcome. Her gesture, however, included a tear rolling down one cheek as she captured my eyes with her own. All at once, she turned and pranced across to stage right, picking up her electric violin, bringing the house down with a cascade of improvisations hot enough to set the place on fire. In the midst of the musical frenzy, the three of them began rising from the confines of their physical bodies on stage. I sat in awe of what I was seeing before my eyes, for the three of them joined hands as they rose, their auras illuminating the space above the stage as they slowly floated upward. I actually laughed out loud at the absurdity of my feelings. Several audience members glared at me, wondering what would cause anyone to laugh at such a moment. I looked around me to see if anyone but I had any idea what was taking place before their very eyes, but no other eyes followed the ascent, for it was beyond the scope of their worldly senses. I was the only person with even a clue of what was unfolding, which made me laugh all the harder as the three of them rose higher and higher, floating easily and without restriction above the concert hall. A rich, warm glow emanated from their path as I followed with my eyes, my ears fixed on their flawless performance on stage. This went on for at least 10 minutes before their auras completed their journey back into their stage-bound bodies, rejoining the audience in real time. As they concluded this opening selection, they received a much-deserved standing ovation. Once settled comfortably into the groove of the evening, those in attendance took a moment to catch their collective breath, allowing the violinist the opportunity to take microphone in hand and address us soothingly. I can't tell you how great it is to come home again. As you know, we've been out on the road for the past year, touring this great country of ours from Pacific to Atlantic, amber waves of grain to purple mountains' majesty. The audience laughed lightly and affectionately as she continued. But home is where the heart is, so here we are again. Just look at this little guy, she teased, gesturing behind her towards the percussionist, actually going over and pinching his cheek to the delight of all. Last time you saw him, he still had lots of baby fat. It's funny what a year on the road will do, right? Cheers and whistles from the female members of the audience made it abundantly clear that the blue-eyed youngster could have his pick on this evening. Please put your hands together for my baby brother, Caden Michael. The spotlight shone on him brightly, illuminating his blushing cheeks, much to the delight of his many female admirers. He bowed deeply, brushing the wavy hair from his eyes as he stood back up. Talk about babies. Can you believe this babe over here? When we last performed for you, she was barely out of diapers, and look at her now. This time, the males in the audience took over on cue, favoring the young guitarist with whistles that you might have heard in a strip joint, but not a concert hall. Please put your hands together for our cousin, Chelsea Miranda. Chelsea kept waving her arms at us, basking in the attention she was being showered with. She bowed to her fans, her ponytail bouncing over her head from behind and hitting the floor in front of her. Giving the audience a few moments to quiet down, the violinist's words continued more softly than before. We'd like to welcome a very special guest who is seated in the audience tonight. And then she just stood there, staring directly into my eyes from her position at stage front. She didn't say another word. She just kept looking deep into my soul. After a few moments of this, people in the audience began looking around, trying to see who she was looking at. Her eyes demanded me to stand. In an automatic physical response, I stood, afraid my legs wouldn't hold me for more than a moment. It was as if she possessed an inner force that suddenly had made my life crystal clear. Emma Jane, Caden Michael, and Chelsea Miranda spoke two words in unison, but the movement of their lips didn't match the echo-chambered words I heard in my mind. I knew no one heard these two words but me. Hi, Papa. Those two words froze me in my seat, tears now flowing down my cheeks, realizing that I was indeed dreaming a vision of the future. For these were my own grandchildren, illuminating just one possible direction in their own lives.